This is the story of a beautiful woman whose life was filled only with sorrow. The moment she was born, her mother passed away, and later, after her marriage, she lost her young husband. How does she face her loneliness? How does an uncontrollable fire of longing ignite within her? And how does she try to extinguish it? And finally, how does a sage help her find peace? Listen to the complete story. It will be captivating. In the northern hills of India, there was a small village called Shivpur. Mornings in this village were filled with the chants of sacred mantras, and evenings resonated with devotional songs. The people here led simple, religious lives. But hidden within this serene village was a secret, one that was slowly poisoning the very air of Shivpur. Shraddha was the most beautiful woman in the village. Her deep black eyes held an unusual depth that could mesmerize anyone. But behind that beauty lay an untold pain. After the death of her husband, her world turned desolate. According to the village customs, a widow was not allowed to remarry and had to follow a life of chastity. People respected her, but no one cared about her emotions and desires. Her life became monotonous, waking up early to visit the temple, spending the day doing household chores, and sitting alone at night, gazing at the stars. Yet deep inside, she longed for a change. One day, a sage named Hari Harnath arrived in the village. He was a tall, well-built man with thick, matted locks, a forehead smeared with sandalwood, and eyes filled with an enigmatic intensity. He claimed to have meditated in the Himalayas for years and had now come to share his wisdom with the world. The villagers welcomed him and gave him shelter in the temple. Soon, his influence spread throughout the village. People believed he could heal the sick and change their destinies. Intrigued by his sermons, Shraddha started visiting the temple regularly. One day, when the temple was nearly empty, she gathered the courage to ask, "Maharaj, do I have an identity of my own, or will I remain just a widow forever?" The sage looked into her eyes and smiled. "Every soul has a journey of its own. You too have a purpose in this world. You just need to find it." That moment awakened something within her. For the first time, she felt understood. From that day on, she never missed a sermon. Slowly, the sage's words started touching the deepest corners of her heart. But soon, strange things began happening in the village. Mysterious sounds echoed from the temple at night. Some villagers claimed they had seen a woman's shadow behind the temple. Others reported that ever since the sage's arrival, eerie incidents had begun. Water flowing on its own, oil lamps flickering without reason, and dogs howling strangely. Doubt started creeping into the villagers' minds. Was the sage truly a spiritual guide, or was there another reason behind his presence? Meanwhile, Shraddha's loneliness turned into an uncontrollable yearning. She struggled to suppress the fire within her, but her heart refused to obey. One stormy night, amidst heavy rainfall, she found herself standing outside the sage's isolated ashram, drenched. Her clothes clung to her body, revealing her shivering form. The sage noticed her and felt a strange pull toward her. "You'll catch a cold. Come inside," he said. Shraddha was trembling, but it wasn't just because of the cold. As the sage placed a shawl over her shoulders, his hand lingered on her wet face. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. "Am I doing something wrong?" she whispered. The sage gazed into her eyes and replied, "The call of the soul is never wrong." At that moment, all barriers of restraint broke. The sage's hand slowly traced the contours of her face. Shraddha closed her eyes, surrendering to the storm within. Outside, the rain poured furiously, and inside, another storm was brewing. It wasn't long before whispers of their relationship spread through the village. One night, Chandrapal, a devotee of the sage, saw Shraddha leaving the ashram late at night. The next day, the entire village was abuzz with gossip. A village council, Panchayat, was called. "Shraddha, is it true that you have an affair with the sage?" the elders demanded. Shraddha stood with her head lowered, tears brimming in her eyes. Before she could answer, the sage stepped forward and declared, "It is true. But this is love, not sin." An uproar broke out. Some villagers blamed the sage, while others held Shraddha responsible. The Panchayat reached a verdict. The sage would be banished from the village, and Shraddha had to perform penance. The sage was forcibly taken away. Shraddha's heart shattered. Her breathing became heavy, and she wept inconsolably, pleading before the council. But their decision remained unchanged. Now she sat alone in the temple every day, the same place where they had once found solace in each other. Sometimes, when the wind blew fiercely, she felt as if a whisper echoed in her ears. The call of the soul is never wrong. And with tears glistening in her eyes, she would smile. Now it's time to bid farewell. I hope to meet you again in the next story. Jai Shri Krishna. Radhe Radhe.